Welcome to StaalX Construction and Steel Podcast. Episode 18, SCOTUS strikes down IEEPA tariffs. Construction industry impacts. The global steel market moves fast. To stay ahead, you need more than just data, you need a partner. Support for today's episode comes from StaalX. We're redefining steel trading through transparency, technology, and global reach. From the job site to the boardroom, StaalX delivers the strength your projects demand. Visit StaalX.com to learn more. Now, let's get into the market.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. And I have to say, if you were working in the construction industry this week, or even just trying to follow the broader economy, you might be feeling a little bit of whiplash.
Oh, whiplash is probably the perfect word for it. We're looking at a stack of reports this week that, honestly, they seem to describe two completely different realities. It just depends on where you look.
Exactly. I mean, we have a massive legal shakeup in Washington. We've got an absolute explosion of activity in one specific sector, and then, a pretty significant freeze in another. It really feels like the economy is moving at two different speeds.
It is. It's a tale of two markets right now. On one side, you have the AI revolution physically reshaping the landscape.
Yeah.
And on the other, the traditional housing market is just struggling to find its footing. And sitting right in the middle of all this is a very complicated legal ruling on trade.
Right. So our mission today is to connect these dots for you. We aren't just going to read you the headlines. We're going to figure out how a Supreme Court ruling from last Friday, the demand for data centers, and the price of a steel beam are actually all part of the exact same story.
Yeah, and when you lay it all out, looking at legal analysis from Newsline and ABC, forecasting data from Construct Connect, the Census Bureau numbers, and material reports from StaalX, a very clear picture emerges. It's a picture of where the capital is flowing and where it's stopped.
Let's jump right into the heavy hitter to start. This was the big news from last Friday, February 20th. The Supreme Court dropped a 6-3 ruling that a lot of people are calling a total game changer for trade policy.
They certainly did. This is the ruling regarding the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. Now, I know that sounds like a massive mouthful of alphabet soup.
It does?
But this act has been a critical tool for the White House.
Right, because for the last few administrations, IEEPA has basically been the easy button for imposing tariffs, hasn't it? Like, if there's an emergency, the president could just use this to slap tariffs on goods fairly quickly.
Exactly. It was the shortcut. But on Friday, the Supreme Court effectively unplugged that button. Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion, and the logic was actually quite specific from a constitutional perspective.
Break that down for us. What was their actual reasoning?
Essentially, the court argued that IEEPA does not explicitly authorize the imposition of tariffs. Justice Roberts pointed out that Congress has passed other statutes that are specifically designed for trade actions laws, like the Trade Expansion Act.
So the court is basically saying, stay in your lane.
Precisely. They're saying, if you want to do trade policy, use the trade laws Congress gave you. Don't use the Emergency Powers Act as a workaround. It's a major reassertion of the separation of powers.
Okay, so that's the legal theory, but let's bring this down to the actual job site for the listener. If you're a general contractor or procurement manager trying to buy materials for a project starting next month, does this ruling mean your costs are about to drop?
That is the big question. We looked at the analysis from Anirban Basu. He's the chief economist over at ABC, and his take is essentially, yes, but.
There is always a but with economists, isn't there?
Always. The yes part is that we should see price reductions in specific areas. We're talking about manufactured components, finished goods. Think about things like HVAC systems, complex electrical fixtures, specialty equipment that might be imported.
So the stuff that goes inside the building.
Right. Those items often got hit with IEEPA tariffs. So in theory, those costs should come down as the tariffs are invalidated.
Okay, well, that sounds like good news. So where's the but?
The but is massive. And this is the nuance that could really trip people up if they aren't paying attention. This ruling strikes down IEEPA tariffs. It does not touch Section 232 tariffs.
Wait, Section 232, that's the national security provision, right?
Correct. That's the statute that underpins the tariffs on raw steel and aluminum. The Supreme Court didn't touch that. So we end up in this weird paradox where the air conditioning unit you buy might get cheaper, but the steel beams holding up a roof remain expensive because those tariffs are still fully active.
That seems like a logistical headache. You have one part of your supply chain loosening up, and the structural foundation is still locked tight.
And we have to add the uncertainty factor on top of that. The administration isn't just going to say, oh, well, we lost and move on. They've already signaled they plan to replace the struck-down tariffs with other mechanisms.
So we might be entering a transition period.
Exactly. We could be looking at 3 to 6 months of regulatory limbo where nobody really knows what the new rules will be. And you know how the construction industry reacts to uncertainty?
Oh, yeah. Suppliers hedge their bets. They keep prices high just in case.
Precisely. If I'm a supplier and I don't know if a new tariff is coming in May, I am keeping my prices high in February to protect my margin. And we have to look at the context. Prices weren't exactly crashing before this ruling anyway.
No, looking at the data, construction input prices are still up 2.8% year over year, and some materials are way above that. I saw a number for copper that literally made my eyes water.
Oh, the copper market is incredibly tight. Copper wire and cable is up over 22% compared to last year. And primary non-ferrous metals, so metals that aren't iron or steel, are up nearly 62%.
62%.
62. So even if this Supreme Court ruling shaves 5% off the cost of an imported HEAC unit, you're fighting a 62% increase in the metals needed to wire it up.
It's like getting a discount on the tires while the engine is on fire.
That is a very vivid way to put it, but yes,
Yeah.
the net effect might not be the savings people are hoping for.
So costs are high and supply chains are complicated. But despite that, there is one part of the market that is absolutely devouring materials right now. We need to talk about where all this stuff is going.
The non-residential sector. We're looking at the 2026 outlook from Construct Connect, and after a bit of a dip in 2025, about a 2.2% decline, they're forecasting a serious rebound.
Yeah, they're projecting the market to hit nearly $1.3 trillion in 2026. That's a 5.4% increase. But when we say a non-residential, we aren't really talking about shopping malls and office towers anymore, are we?
Not at all. The composition of that sector has completely changed. The engine driving this train is almost entirely tech. It's AI and the physical infrastructure needed to support it.
I saw a stat in the Oxford economics data that data centers now account for roughly half of all office construction activity. Half! That is mind-blowing.
It really shows the shift. Office construction used to mean cubicles and conference rooms. Now, essentially, we're building housing for machines. We're shifting from building spaces for people to building spaces for servers.
And it's not just the data centers themselves. We're still seeing the tailwinds of the IEEPA Act fueling these massive manufacturing facilities.
We are. But there's a really interesting geographic layer to this that the report highlighted. This boom isn't happening everywhere.
Right. They mentioned that geography is the second most important factor for builders right now.
It's all about the inputs. If you're building a massive data center, you don't care about a nice view or being near a subway line. You care about cheap power and access to massive amounts of water for cooling.
So where exactly is the money going?
The Southeast. We're seeing a massive boom in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, places with historically lower industrial energy costs, and of course Texas and Virginia, which are the legacy hubs for this stuff.
It's creating this crazy feedback loop, isn't it? The demand is so high in those areas that it's triggering other construction.
Exactly. You can't just build the box. You have to build the grid to keep the box turned on. The report explicitly mentions that this data center boom is triggering significant power and water infrastructure work. It's a cascading effect.
Now, there was one concept in the Construct Connect report that I think defines this entire era of construction: the mega project.
Yes. This is the key to understanding the 2026 market. A mega project is defined as a single project valued at $1 billion or more. Spending on these projects grew by almost 80% last year.
80% growth. And the stat that really stuck with me in 2025, 1 out of every $4 spent in the entire construction industry went to a mega project.
Just think about the gravitational pull of that. When you have a project of that size, a multi-billion-dollar battery plant or a massive server campus, it sucks the oxygen out of the room for the entire region.
It consumes all the labor.
All the labor, all the concrete, all the cranes. If you're a mid-sized contractor trying to build a local school or a strip mall, you're competing against a billion-dollar giant for the exact same electricians and plumbers.
It totally explains why margins are being squeezed for everyone else. The forecast mentions that labor shortages are continuing to pressure margins, and it's specifically because these mega projects are hoarding the talent.
Right, so even if revenue is up for the industry as a whole, profit isn't guaranteed for the smaller players if they're waging a bidding war for workers against a gigafactory.
So we have this roaring fire in the industrial and data center space. But now we have to turn the heater off and step out into the cold. Because if you're working in residential construction, this data looks very, very different.
It is a stark contrast. We looked at the latest numbers from the Census Bureau and Newsweek, and calling it a chill is putting it mildly.
Let's look at the housing starts. How did we end 2025?
Poorly. Housing starts ended the year at a rate of about 1.4 million, which is down 7.3% from December 2024. But honestly, the real concern isn't just what happened last year, it's what builders are planning for this year.
You're talking about the permits.
Right. Building permits are the canary in the coal mine. They tell you what's coming down the pipeline. And permits were down 8% year over year in November and another 2.2% in December.
So builders are actively pulling back. They aren't just slowing down. They're filing less paperwork to build in the future.
And you can see that in their sentiment. The National Association of Home Builders Index, which measures builder confidence, dropped to a 36. Just for context, anything under 50 is considered negative. 36 is, well, it's pretty gloomy.
What's the root cause here? Is it just the interest rates keeping buyers away?
It's the 3 L's: labor, lots, and lumber. Though lumber really stands in for all materials. We know affordability is crushing the buyers. But for the builders, land costs are still sky high, and regulatory hurdles make it expensive to even break ground. And go back to what we just discussed. Where is all the labor?
At the data centers.
Exactly. If you're a skilled tradesperson, why frame single-family homes when you can get steady, guaranteed overtime work at the megaproject down the road? The residential sector is being starved of resources by the industrial boom.
It feels like a total gridlock. Buyers can't buy, so builders won't build.
Yeah.
Is there any silver lining here at all for the residential market?
There is one bright spot: remodeling.
Because nobody is moving.
It's the lock-in effect. People have low mortgage rates from a few years ago that they absolutely don't want to give up, or they just can't afford the new prices, so they stay put and renovate the house they have. Remodeling demand remains really solid.
Is there any hope for new builds?
There's some hope for spring 2026. The experts seem to think that if inflation eases and interest rates dip a bit, we might see consumers come back off the sidelines. But that is a very big if.
Okay, so we've covered the legal landscape, the industrial boom, and the housing bust. I want to zoom in now on the actual stuff we build with. We have a report from StaalX on the steel market, and honestly, it mirrors this two-speed theme perfectly.
It really does. It's almost schizophrenic. On one hand, you have long products, specifically structural beams and wire rods. Prices there are just surging.
Give us the numbers. How much of a surge are we talking about?
Wire rods are up $30 a ton in February. Structural beams jumped $60 a ton.
Wow. And why is that? Is it just the demand from the data centers?
Demand is part of it. Remember, those data centers need massive steel skeletons. But the report points to a critical supply issue. There's limited domestic production for these specific large profiles, and the mills are having what they call maintenance hiccups.
Hiccups is a very nice way of saying the factories are breaking down.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
They're running so hot to meet demand that they're having maintenance issues. And imports aren't saving us. The report says if you order new import steel right now, you aren't getting it until July.
That's a 5-month lead time. In construction, 5 months is an eternity.
It breaks the schedule completely. So if you need a beam, you pay a premium and you wait. But then you look at rebar and it's a totally different story.
Rebar is the steel that goes into concrete, right?
Correct. And rebar prices are softening or at least stabilizing.
Why the difference?
Good old-fashioned competition. We're seeing the high bar effect. New players like Hybar and Nucor's new micro mill in Lexington are ramping up production. They're flooding the market with fresh volume.
So the extreme shortage of rebar we saw a while back is over.
For now, yes. The report says domestic sales reps are actually having to pick up the phones and hustle for orders again, which they haven't had to do in a long, long time.
But overall, the outlook from StaalX isn't exactly cheap steel across the board, is it?
No. They're pretty clear that despite the rebar situation improving, the overall pricing environment is going to remain elevated through the second half of 2026. The floor is high because the demand from infrastructure and data centers just keeps a safety net under prices.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for the listener. It is February 2026. You have the Supreme Court handing down a win against executive overreach on tariffs, which sounds great in a headline, but likely won't lower the cost of the raw materials that actually matter most right now.
Right. The structural costs are sticky.
Then you have an industrial sector that is absolutely on fire, fueled by AI and government spending, creating these mega projects that are sucking up $1 of every $4 in the industry.
And taking the labor force with them.
Meanwhile, the residential market is shivering in the cold, unable to build affordably. And the steel market is split right down the middle. If you need to pour a driveway, you're okay, but if you need to frame a server farm, you're paying top dollar.
It's a market defined by disparity. If you are attached to the AI and industrial complex, times are good, but chaotic. If you're outside of that bubble, you're facing significant headwinds.
It really forces you to think about where you position yourself in this industry.
It does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this raises a pretty uncomfortable question for everyone listening.
What's that?
We're seeing a historic concentration of resources. We're pouring concrete and steel into the cloud, into digital infrastructure at a rate we've never seen before. But resources are finite. We don't have infinite steel, and we definitely don't have infinite electricians.
So what happens?
If mega projects continue to consume 25% or more of the industry's capacity, are we inadvertently creating a permanent two-tier economy? Are we building a world where the massive corporate-backed projects have unlimited capacity, while the residential and small commercial sectors, the actual places where we live and shop, are permanently starved?
That is a huge thought. Are we crowding out the American home for the American server farm?
We might be building the smartest infrastructure in the world, but we really have to ask if we're leaving the foundational economy behind to do it.
A fascinating tension to consider as we head into the spring. Thank you for diving deep with us today. We will be watching these trends and those steel prices very closely.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening. Explore more at www.staalx.com.